and from here on we'll be in the recording. So hello again, my dear colleagues and friends and AMBA community. I'm really pleased to introduce to you our speaker for tonight, Cathy-Mae, is it Karelse?
That's
How do you,
perfectly fine.
yes, thank you. She's an expert in transformation and change, social and also policy making. And Cathy-Mae is a lead as well in diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging at Mindfulness Initiative. And also the author of the book, Disrupting White Mindfulness and Race and Racism in the Wellbeing Industry. And we'll be really pleased to hear you, Cathy-Mae, about discussing how we can change the world of white mindfulness, especially talking with AMBA and where we are teachers in Europe. And as we know, Europe is, there's a war in Europe, as well as racial conflicts in many countries. And so we are active, being mindfulness teachers. We are all active in that field too, I would say, our being citizens in our own countries. And also how to do this maybe in a sustainable way. I'm talking about sustainability too. So yeah, without further ado, I'll just give you the floor. I guess we'll start with a short practice to arrive here. And thank you very much again for coming tonight.
Of course, thank you so much for the invitation, for you hosting, Stasi, for Katharina being in touch, and for the invitation to be with all of you this evening. It's actually great to have a small group. I've not had this size group before, so it's really nice because it means that we can have a more intimate and close conversation when we get there. So many thanks to you for showing up and for your attention and your interest in being here. We will start with a very short practice, people, of arriving. And so the invitation is for us to each find our one precious seat. And of course, often this comes with simply becoming aware of the many flows that are underway in this marvelous human organism that is right under our noses. So the invitation here is to simply have a sense of arriving, a sense possibly of the various weather patterns in our thinking, our emotions, our sensations, and seeing if it's possible to meet all of these with kindness and with gentleness and with an invitation. So we are rolling out the welcome mat for ourselves and for one another. We're part of this precious community this evening. And it may be that the breath slows. It may be that we're able to draw the awareness to the breath. And you may wish to guide the breath so that we're able to bring a deeper sense of relaxation into the body with a slightly lengthened exhalation. It may be that there's simply a a sense of what it's like, this breathing body. And noticing the nature of mind, whether it's allowing itself to settle, whether it's responding to being however it is. And then becoming aware of the weight of this body, of the incredible earth that is supporting us, whether it's through the surrogate of the floor or a chair or wherever we find ourselves. This incredible earth that provides some stability beneath, and the heavens above that allow for this breath to move, this body to be. And then in whatever way is appropriate for you, gently transitioning so that it's possible you may wish to drop the chin to the chest if the lids have shut, and to open the gaze downwards. And then to return the open eyes to this community and this room. We have time for only a brief practice, and it may be this incredible delight of seeing faces of friends and of a community that we are forming together. So thank you so much for your attention, for your practice, for being here, and for us coming together. I do want to check with you to begin with. Is the sound okay for everybody? Is it all good? Wonderful. Nice. And I've loved the fact that you can show me thumbs, people, because I need this to be very interactive. So without further ado, we didn't actually check the positioning of my slides, but I'll give you, usually in mindfulness, we wouldn't say what's going to happen, right? We'd keep you in suspense and we would just roll with the program. But I will say that I'll present for about 35-40 minutes so that we really leave enough time for a conversation and a discussion. And my guideline is to present the book. So I'm wanting to present the book, and so that the discussion really addresses what you were welcoming us to look at, Stasi, this question of how do we bring about the change that we all want to see, of creating communities and organizations of belonging, of breaking down any false borders that we don't wish to have in place that make people feel excluded or not belonging. And I'm just going to assume for now that that's like our common purpose. But of course, you are very welcome to say otherwise when it comes to the engagement. I want to honor, as we enter this work, that we are living through very tender times in the world. And so this conversation, this inviting ourselves into this very tenderness of what our world is like, the very divided nature of our world, is of course touching. It moves us, it touches us deeply. And we, as far as possible, as our precious community, are going to embrace what arises, as we usually would in our mindfulness spaces. So the trust is also that you will be taking care of yourselves and that you create safety for yourself in this environment, that we're not expecting it to magically be something that appears. Together we create this. Let me share screen so that we can start the just perfect, people. It's just perfect. Okay, so I can see some of you, and I'm going to ask for some engagement as we move along. The forgive me, that title should be different. So the title of the book is Disrupting White Mindfulness, Race and Racism in the Wellbeing Industry. And it's a title which I invite you to kind of soak in, because actually the title itself has an impact on us. It lands in us in particular ways. For some people, it's like, yes, at last we can get to discuss this stuff. And for other people, it hurts, it's painful. So just to acknowledge that there is something in this process which stirs things up. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, that actually we're wanting to stir things up. We're wanting to bring about change. The book has 3 parts. It's divided into the roots of exclusion and othering, which actually goes back historically to understand colony and empire and how we come to be in the mental mindset space that is predominant in our societies. Part 2 looks in more detail at how pedagogies that we have arrived at within the mindfulness space tend to recycle the whiteness that predominates in our societies. And all of this, of course, the book is lengthy, so it's discussed in some detail. And then part 3 turns the corner, saying, how do we ourselves come to embody justice so that we're not waiting for it to be handed to us by anybody? We actually are creating what we understand and foresee as liberation in the world and in our context within mindfulness spaces. So what I want to look at this evening is how this incredible vision that Jon Kabat-Zinn has in 1979, this 10-second vision that he says just splashes across his mind on retreat with a Zen teacher. And he has this incredible vision of these new fields of scientific and clinical investigation of mindfulness spreading to hospitals and medical centers and clinics across the country and around the world. And of course, much of that has become true. So we're wanting to ask the question, why has it become distorted in the ways in which it's become distorted? We do have the spread of mindfulness. We may not have it in hospitals and medical centers, but we do have a fairly wide spread of it socially. Why is it stuttering, and why has it come to take the form and shape that it's taking at the moment? And in this discussion, here's the invitation. This stuff is sticky. It's a subject area we don't necessarily want to approach, or we kind of approach it with a little bit of reticence because it's not an easy topic. So, week 5 of the MBSR and MBCT program, difficult emotions, people, difficult emotions. We are trained in being able to approach this stuff. Of course, some of it is going to feel uncomfortable, but we're wanting to ensure as far as possible this evening that you create sufficient safety so that the discomfort, which is really about us stepping out of our comfort zones, the discomfort can be held and cared about in ways that make it possible to stay the course. So this is the invitation and the acknowledgement of dis-ease and discomfort. Okay, Kasia, I'm sorry, I have a very soporific voice, so forgive me. I'm
just tired. I'm just tired, but
oh,
I'm listening attentively.
oh, thank you. Well, I hope you are able to rest as you listen. This diagram developed by Generation 5 is really a way of showing us how we are shaped by all of the ecosystems that surround us. So when we grow up in different contexts, Stasia and I were discussing earlier, different cultures, we are shaped and formed and informed very much by our intimate family, our schooling, our community, the institutions we attend, even by the ways in which we relate to institutions like policing, healthcare, criminal justice, etc. All of those have an imprint on us. When we are in societies that are structured along the lines of race, class, gender, and other significant characteristics of difference, faith, age, sexuality, when we live in societies that use characteristics of difference, that exploit characteristics of difference to create divisions, those impact on our bodies. Please, people, interrupt me. These are divide and rule regimes that I'm talking about. I grew up and lived for many decades. I grew up in apartheid South Africa and was active in the struggle for national liberation, and then in the work of nation building. So I'm talking about societies that imprint and shape us in ways that make us feel lesser than, not good enough, not this enough, not that enough, etc. And it's those imprints that remain with us. What happens in divide and rule societies is we end up imbibing quite a lot of that conditioning. So this is all about socialization and conditioning. And so we'll come to slides that speak about the imprints of systems that we oppose, but the imprints of what this leaves on us. The good thing about this diagram is it suggests to us that each of these ecosystems are also sites of change. So remember, apartheid South Africa, we changed the dispensation, right? Of course, we didn't change it sufficiently, because today we still have a divided society. But we managed to change the de jure apartheid. The fact that we still have de facto apartheid is similar, makes us similar to most other countries in the world. But it's really the divide and rule that we want to understand. It's a way of our societies dividing people that comes to be imprinted on the ways in which we relate to one another. So I want to briefly speak about intersectionality, because we want to understand that intersectionality says we cannot pay attention to just one characteristic of difference any longer. In most cases, there are multiple characteristics of difference that land on people's bodies. So there's a really useful concept that Ray Johnson speaks about. They refer to what they call 1,000 paper cuts. That paper cuts are very small and they're not visible to your or my eye. But when someone has paper cuts all over their body, it stings and hurts and itches. And so intersectionality is like that. We have these hard realities that are meted upon our bodies virtually every moment of the day in societies that make us feel that we're not good enough or that we don't belong. It's a very common problem that we're seeing increasingly in the world. And this is Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the concept of intersectionality, and she was building on the many works of great feminists throughout the ages, Angela Davis, Heidi Mirza, great leaders in South Africa who always appreciated and understood. In those days, we would speak about triple oppression, race, class, and gender. And of course, it's become a lot more layered and complicated now in terms of identity, forged around sexuality, around age, around faith, etc. And then I want to introduce another concept. This is the concept of whiteness. And this is for us to understand. This is Bayo Akomolafe, by the way. And Bayo Akomolafe is currently leading this amazing program called We Will Dance with Mountains. And the program, it does not call itself this, but it's about decolonizing our own bodies. It's about dancing in ways that allow us to release the the tensions and the imprints of systemic whiteness that is meted upon all of us. And so the ways in which Bios speaks about whiteness is to remind us that this is not about white people. These are structural arrangements of privilege and power. This is about how power plays out in our societies. And I hope that it will become evident soon that this is why we have a DEI problem in the first place. If we didn't have these problems of inheriting systemic racism, systemic sexism, systemic classism, if we didn't have these problems, we would not need to have a DEI effort that tries to correct inequalities in our society. So this has everything to do with privileging some groups who are then able to have access to services, to mortgages, to education, to jobs, to etc. And whereas other people don't. And what happens in neoliberal societies, which I think is most of the societies we're living in, is that many people live on 0-hour contracts. So there isn't the privilege or the comfort or the security of having work, of even having work. There are high rates of unemployment in some societies, South Africa being one of them. But there's a sinister way also in which whiteness pretends that we are all the same, in which it imposes social norms and dominant narratives that suggest that everybody is commonly human, and therefore there's nothing really wrong. And it hyper-individualizes us so that we don't have a sense of community and we aren't able to take refuge in community. And so we see the responses and the reactions, right? That identity groups form and people feel much safer in identity groups where they are with people who feel familiar and who feel like them. Okay, so when we live in these kinds of societies, the question we want to ask is what becomes embodied? We want to believe that we embody mindfulness and compassion. Sadly, that isn't the end of the story. So those social norms and mental models that I referred to earlier, these lie very much at the bottom of an iceberg. This is the tip that we tend to live in. This is kind of our conscious minds. And the subconscious and unconscious minds are submerged beneath the oceans. So our knee-jerk patterns of behavior, the way we see the world, the way we see one another, these patterns, these deep-rooted patterns of othering that is very evident in our world, these are propagated by systems and they live in our bodies. And so even though we want to change, we've got to address what is in the body in order to make meaningful change. Because otherwise we're changing up here, right? And I like people to do this. I like you to like put your hands around your head and to say, yes, thank you, Kasia. And to say, this is not enough. We can't only change it. This is the Cartesian framework, right? This is an idea that I think, therefore I am, that there isn't really a body, that the soma doesn't matter quite as much as my thinking brain, if you like. And so really understanding how the issues are in the tissues, as the saying goes, requires us to understand that this work of DEI needs us to address the patterns that are locked in at a cellular level, that has become submerged and embodied at a deep cellular level. So there are a couple of, they're heroes of mine. Steve Biko was a very prominent South African hero who was killed in detention, in prison by the apartheid police. And his point, the most potent weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed, gives us an idea of how easy it is to control a people when you make them believe that they are lesser than. And as Toni Morrison says, we then spend our whole lives trying to prove that we are worthy, trying to show that we're as good, trying to show that we are equal. And so there's something that needs to change in this system in these systems of oppression. Bob Marley, of course, famously sings from Marcus Garvey's speech, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." So this notion of embodied liberation, of actually finding our own freedom and understanding that we do this in community, and we do this through telling our stories, and we do this through being witnessed, those become very powerful ways of building movements and changing systems and changing structures. Ilana Mickelson is a grand activist, academic, gardener, incredible human being who famously writes that we need to honor and respect difference. In fact, we need to leverage difference in contexts of DEI. And so what she's saying is that one does not have to experience the world as a woman to have insight into patriarchy or to be a feminist. We know this, people. But we need to have a fuller account of is made possible if we start from the point of view of women's or Black people's experiences. So often when we are designing DEI systems and programs, we're doing it from the point of where we find ourselves in our organizations that are severely lacking in terms of diversity, in terms of notions of equity, in terms of inclusion. And that usually is the first stumbling block, that we're trying to correct something that we have some skills and tools to approach, but we actually need people who can create a different table to guide and lead us in how we shape society's systems and organizations differently. So to return to this notion that change has to be inner and outer, that the reason we're doing this in a system of embracing mindfulness and compassion is precisely because the change we are looking for, and this is really following Dr. Martin Luther King's teachings, the change has to be cellular because the issues are in the tissues. It is personal. The personal is political. It has to be intimate. We have to be able to touch those deep crevices, those wounded places of our being, those vulnerable spaces, in order to be able to make change meaningful. And so the notion that we are making love synonymous with justice is really our work, that we want to understand justice is the work of love. It is the work of cultivating love. And we want to learn to be able to speak in this language increasingly. And we're not talking about a Hollywood sentimental love. We're talking about a radical, powerful love which understands truth and understands that justice is forever evolving and that it's up to us to shape and create it. You may be more familiar, the previous slide was Prentice Hemphill, who has a fabulous podcast called Finding Our Way. You may be more familiar with Reverend Angel Kyodo Williams, who's working with the same quotation from Dr. King. Love and justice are not two. Without inner change, there can be no outer change. So the DEI work that we're wishing to do has to happen within us. We have to change in the process in order to embrace and to do this work. And I love the slide, and I don't know to whom to attribute the picture, that Ideally, we're wanting to create the world we wish to see. And ideally, this part of this Venn diagram actually becomes much larger as we change and as we change the world around us. So it's a good visual to keep in our minds. So people, this is where we're going to take long exhalations. I'm about to show slides that are based on my research that shows, thank you, Kasha, I appreciate you, that shows the impact of what I'm calling white mindfulness on 3 large organizations that I investigated over the course of my research. And I want to show you what the picture looks like and why, if we remember Ilana Mickelson's point, of course we can change the world as cis, heteronormative, white men. You know, that's possible. But it's much better to change the world by engaging and having as part of our team players, stakeholders who understand how the systems of discrimination and oppression actually land on bodies and how they exclude. So there are going to be 3 of these slides. When we look at organizational power and decision makers within the organizations that I investigated, this is what we end up with in terms of directors and decision makers. 87% are white men, 13% are white women. The 0% refers to no men from the global majority and no women from the global majority. Someone suggested to me that I explain the term the global majority. When we are looking at race and ethnicity, it becomes really, really messy because, of course, I can be Bangladeshi, but I can be of a particular ethnicity. I can be Indian, but I can be Bangladeshi as well. I could be mixed race. So there are a whole lot of factors that creep in to categorizations of Black, minority, ethnic. And so, you know, at some stage we started using and still use Black and brown people. And please let me say, because this is a great point to make, in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa, we were very opposed to the term non-white. The hero, Steve Biko, who I showed you earlier, actually started the Black consciousness movement. And that wasn't simply about Black is beautiful. Yes, it was that. But it was also inclusive of white comrades who fought alongside. Neil Agate was killed in prison, you know, as a doctor and a labor leader. So we have a non-racial struggle in South Africa. But it's important for us to understand that the notions of the ways in which the apartheid regime exploited race meant that you created white as being superior. And then when you use the word non-white, it means that white is the normal and you're comparing everybody else to white. So we never use the language non-white. Black is a great word. And of course, we understand that there's Black joy and more Blackness studies that are seeing the value of the contributions, the incredible glory, the glorious contributions that Black people have made to the world. People of the global majority really embraces all of these people who are people of Black, brown, people of color. So when we look at people of the global majority, they are 80% of the world, as opposed to 20% of the world, which is classified as white people. So it gives a very different feel, right? Because when we look at a slide like this, 3 large organizations, white, I almost said domination, but you understand what I mean. White people in positions of decision-making power and power over. When we look at the key features of white mindfulness, spaces are white. So, you know, despite the way I look, in apartheid South Africa, I'm Black. In mindfulness spaces, I feel uncomfortable. That's not something that somebody can say to me, just don't feel like that, dear. Just get a grip, you know, keep calm and show up anyway. And in fact, those spaces, you know, all the spaces of training, etc., never ever really embraced issues of social justice. And so we acted and behaved as if we were just practicing mindfulness and becoming peaceful and calm, and not actually engaging the outer world. So remember, we're saying change has to be inner and outer. It can't be one or the other. It has to be both of those for us to make love synonymous with justice. The spaces are white, the power is white, teachers, so this is looking at teaching staff, predominantly white. And it's very interesting to see here how the relationship inverts, right? Because you don't have as many white men teaching, you have many more white women teaching, and you have some people of the global majority teaching as well. But do people see that? White men in leadership, white women, the majority of the teachers. Show me some thumbs, people. I haven't seen your thumbs for a while. Thank you so much, Marina. I like them. Thank you. Okay, so final slide. Reproducing whiteness through pedagogy. Again, teacher trainers. We see the predominance of our pedagogies as being uncritical, as almost teaching mindfulness in a bubble. So it's a mindfulness that is disengaged from this world of difficulty, this world of injustices, this world of inequalities. It's a mindfulness that sits as if it's outside that world. And again, we're seeing the impact through neoliberalism of highly corporatized education, where we're measuring, we're producing a whole lot of metrics, but we're not necessarily aware, I was going to say concerned with, we're not necessarily aware of the damages in terms of what is excluded from our pedagogies and which people are being excluded. So I'm going to just stop the screen for a moment, and then I'll finish off the rest of the presentation in about 10 minutes, because I want to ask you how this is landing. And I just want to pause for a moment so that we can take care, and I can get a sense from you. Are we good? It's so good to see you, Katharina. I'm so happy that you are here safely. Are we good to proceed, or do we need a little pause? And people, I hope that we're allowing this to land, so that it's not just sitting up here, because that's one of our defenses, right? When something hits hard, we let it come here and then we cut it off. In fact, we quite literally cut it off at the brain stem, so that it's a protective mechanism. That's good. That's a good thing. Protective mechanism might be working, but we almost want to turn down the volume of it so that we do allow this to land. It's only when we face it and when we see it that we are able to engage with the realities of what this is. So let me ask you, and we're going to do this with thumbs. Shall we have a small pause and a very wee practice, or shall we move through like 7 minutes of slides and then we have our moment together to open up the discussion? Two options, people. Carry on with the discussion. Let's proceed with the 7 minutes. Please show me your thumbs. No, 7 minutes, 7 minutes. Shall we proceed with the 7 minutes? Or Or do we want to pause here for a 3-minute breathing space? Thank you, Fatma. Thank you, Fatma. I want to honor you as really being very precious in holding this in our space for us today. So let us pause for just a moment, people. And let us allow the seat that we so honor and this practice that oftentimes allows us, not always, but oftentimes allows us to turn towards difficulty. Let us allow this practice and this gentleness to embrace us and to embrace this whole community, and to honor Fatma, this lived experience, of the horrors of what is happening in our world. And it may be that we allow the lengthened exhalation to drop us deeper into these bodies. It may be that we actually wish to hug this body by placing the right hand around the left upper arm, the left hand around the right upper arm, and we may wish to rock. We may wish to sway. We may wish to simply caress these arms. We may wish to just allow the opposite fingers to tap the chest so that the body is very much invited into this space. And as we know, what makes our practices extremely powerful is if we devote and we dedicate our practices to others. And so please, you invite yourselves, if you wish to dedicate your practice so that others may benefit from this way of paying attention with kindness and compassion and deep, deep care. Caring about this organism, this community, this wider world of such concentrated strife that we are all witnessing at the moment. And please take your time to transition so that if you wish to lower the gaze or bow the heads or find a way to bring the eyes back into this space, we allow ourselves to take in through the eyes this wonderful community again. I'm going to share the screen again, people, and move us through in about 7 minutes so that we reach the end of the presentation and so that we can be together in our sharing and in our conversation. So we've done our pause, and there is a question there for you which you may wish to consider at the very end. This third part of the book, as I said earlier, is really about embodying liberation. And as we know, and Fatma, I'm holding you very much in awareness here. As we know, it's not always easy, right, for us to feel an embodied sense of freedom because of those ecosystems that keep imposing on the body, those 1,000 paper cuts. And at times like this, we lean into our community. The community holds us. The community understands that we are embodying liberation for more beings. So the importance of really, for some of us, we practice liberation. We practice liberation as a way of changing worlds. And so I want to speak here just a little bit about compassion and the fact that if it doesn't change us, it's not compassion. So oftentimes we end at this place of empathy. And empathy is this, of course, feeling with someone. I feel with you. But it may not change us. I may leave that engagement with my same values intact, with my same personality, with my same views, with my same patterns and ways of being in the world. Compassion, when it is something that we are engaging with passion, the Latin, the notion of with passion, we are moved by the engagement. We are changed by the engagement. And so the invitation here is for us to really use the word compassion with greater gravitas, to really appreciate and value it, and to not use it too lightly, and to check in with ourselves when we are feeling compassion, when we are being changed by the engagement, and when it is a level of empathy with which we are engaging, which of course is incredible in itself. And then I want to speak a little bit about Ubuntu, again, a concept that we know well, but of course we want to understand, and it's really worth reading this combined statement by Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Tutu. The inner core of every person's humanity is Ubuntu. My humanity is tied up with yours. We can only grow through the progression of others. Our ability to move mountains can only be realized in community. We cannot find our freedom outside of community. We cannot become free outside of community. So this notion of the mycelial network, this notion that we actually are really interconnected, is very much this notion of Ubuntu. I cannot eat a meal at a table where nobody else has food. It's that sense of feeling our interconnectedness to such an extent that my world becomes changed in the ways in which I commit to changing the world. Dr. Martin Luther King, we're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Sherry Mitchell does beautiful intergenerational work, working with 7 generations, in which we're not simply looking 7 generations forward at the consequences of our actions. We're placing ourselves as the middle generation with 3 generations behind us and 3 ahead of us. And so the practice really is a rich practice of being able to lean into our ancestors and to know that we have your back, and to be able to imagine and dream and envision our generations to come, and to know that we have their backs. This is very much a practice of us making this a living world, and appreciating that the ancestral realms that we're speaking of are not simply human beings, right? That we're honoring the elements, the ways in which the earth supports us, the way in which the air frees us, the way in which the sun allows for digestion and transformation. We're honoring all of the elements, the winged and finned friends in how we are needing to change our relationships with one another and with the world. So here is the good news, people. When we change our organizations and when DEI actually activates, when we are working with communities to change our organizations, there's this wonderful notion called the curb cut effect. It was written about by Angela Glover Blackwell in 2017. And the curb cut effect is based on this reality of some friends in wheelchairs going out onto the sidewalk, and instead of having to kind of wheel themselves with a bump off the sidewalk into the road, they threw down some cement and they created a ramp. And so the curb cut effect is the notion that originally curbs were cut. We have those ramps now to service disabled people in wheelchairs, but they're used by everybody. People pushing trolleys, pushing strollers, people on bikes, people walking, running, jogging, etc. It's the very same with when we create systems and organizations and structures based on leveraging difference. In other words, we're not saying we're all the same, leveraging the difference, the different perspectives that we bring to challenges and problems. When we create those kinds of systems and organizations, everybody benefits. Everybody benefits. Often when we think of change, we think about deficit. We think about who is going to lose power. Or we think about this tiny bit of power that we now have to share with everybody. And so we want to really challenge the ways we are thinking and to understand that we want to think very differently about power, power within and power with. Deep systems change, of course, requires alignment of leadership values and well-being. And well-being itself, we want to move away from this pathologized notion of wellness to understand some of us may never cure from our conditions that we have, but we can still be whole. And so there's a lot that we can challenge in terms of these notions that whiteness foists upon us as the sanitized, versions of who and how we're supposed to be. And just to end off with Nelson Mandela's incredible message of to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. They're very powerful words, given what we are witnessing in our world today. And we want to understand that our freedoms are entangled. I would not usually do this, but I think I was invited to. The paperback of the book is coming out in May next year. Don't buy it now. It's the irony of being a book that's all about accessibility, and it's completely inaccessible because it's come out as an academic hardback at like a ridiculous price, but it's coming out in May as a paperback at a very reasonable price. And we would like, through Iyamba, to offer master classes to support people through these processes of making and being and becoming the change that we're wishing to see within our organizations. So people, this is the offering to you. And now it's all about you. And I have a chance to greet my beloved colleague, Richard, as well. I've not been able to acknowledge you before. So wonderful to have you here, Richard. Thank you. Please, people, how would you like to take this forward? And I'm aware you need to, or has Julie already left? You're still here, Julia. I'm aware you have so little time. Was there anything you wanted to comment on or question? Or
I'm so sorry I have to leave and miss the discussion, but yeah. I mean, it is a lot, isn't it? You know, it feels like, you know, for me, I'm in spaces where we have these conversations a lot, not necessarily mindfulness spaces, I have to say, but I really appreciated your invitation to let it land, because I was noticing how I was really up here thinking about it, and yeah, and then just having the opportunity to actually feel it, and yeah, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here, Julia.
I'm so sorry to leave, and yeah.
Go well with your next.
Pick up a child. Yeah, sorry.
Go well.
Bye bye. See you another time. I'm going to read. I'm going to get your book as a paperback.
And please be in touch. Please be in touch. Thank you. I want to hand it back over, Stasi, to you and to Katharina as to how you'd like to perhaps chair the next part. But I really am here, and I really welcome people's perspectives and inputs and insights. You know, we have to create this conversation together, right? And to digest things together. And please remember, people, there is nothing wrong. You can disagree with me. You can say to me, I don't know where you get you know, you can please challenge me. It does not have to be like all this great consensus at all. So please bring whatever is here for you. Please bring it forward. Thank you.
Katerina, would you like, or shall we organize the discussion in a way?
Go ahead, Stasi, go ahead.
Maybe okay.
Take comments and questions first, and then open for more.
Yeah, I'm sure we all have a lot to say, especially with this really so much kindness and this difficult theme to be introduced in such a gentle way. Thank you for that. When you mentioned, Cathy-Mae, that this has to land and how we experience it in the body, my head was going really hot, and at the same time I felt like goosebumps, and that's how it landed in my body, because personally I've had many experiences in the whiteness of the world. I've been living in many places in Europe, and it's still there, and it's here in the UK too, and the Brexit, what happened with it. So yeah, I bet we all have our experiences. So I really would like to invite, I think Katharina would agree, for people to just share how they felt as well, but also any questions, how all these concepts find place in their own mind. So yeah, any sharings, please? You're welcome.
Marina is having her hand up.
Yeah, I didn't know if I should just show you or put it out there. Thank you, first of all, for this. It was really wonderful. And yes, it brings up so much. Mostly what I noticed for me, it brings a lot of confusion, just a lot of confusion, because there's so many situations, for me particularly, where I feel not white at all, and then very white, and then not white enough. You know, I'm born in Yugoslavia, but I'm from the part that is Serbia, and Serbia is still not European Union, so not really as glamorous white as Western Europe. But then I moved to the States at some point, and I was married to a Filipino guy who was treated in America more like a lower, you know, not even a race, but just lower status, as opposed to me, who was an immigrant becoming a citizen through him. So it was a lot of that, right? And then being in the States, I don't relate to white in the States, nor they actually appear to see me like that. So I wouldn't say I'm a woman of color. I mean, I would never just, kind of say that, but there's a part of me that doesn't just identify with that white. But then I also have to remember, right, that in a lot of situations, I was treated in a certain way because I am white, no matter how I kind of feel about it. So it was a lot of, there's a lot of confusion. And then, coming from Serbia as a part of Yugoslavia that went through war, where most of us look kind of alike, and yet the background is that we're not the same. We have different cultural backgrounds. We had different religions. We had different, ways of growing up and mindsets. And yet what that war contributed to. So yeah, it just brings a lot of confusion. Also spending some time in America and working around retreat centers and seeing that actually the whiteness in mindfulness is overwhelming. Is overwhelming to the point that I honestly I can't even work anymore, and kind of, not as a teacher. I do teach a certain kind of mindfulness, but I was more kind of helping out in retreat centers, and to see how it is set up to basically cater most white people who can afford it, because the prices are very high. The topics are not actually culturally appropriated and ethically appropriated to any other group but to white group. And there's just, I think somebody used that term, whitewashing. There's just a bit of whitewashing in what's being taught. And that's something that kind of I was lately repulsed by, and I kind of would choose not to be part of that. But at the same time, moving forward as to what do I do, right? In terms of actions, in terms of so what is it out there for me, and what would be culturally appropriate for me, right? To do and how to show up and what to stand for. Those are the things that are not fully clear to me. But yeah, therefore a lot of confusion. I'm really grateful for the topic, and I was looking forward to be here today. But I think this is good because it stirs up, and there are things to think about and to, move forward with. So thank you for that.
And I just want to, before we come to you, Magdalena, I want to just make a small comment to you, Marina, to thank you for, Fatma noted in the chat that you're presenting us with such rich examples of intersectionality, and how it's not, we can't just fit into one box, and it's not as simple as that, and so the complexity that you're speaking about, and also the sensitivity through your lived experience of seeing how your partner was treated, and I mean so seeing some of those paper cuts get made, and let me just say, to your point of white spaces, there is so much mindfulness happening outside of white spaces. So, and I want to name that because these are not the only areas of mindfulness, and it's important for us to engage with that, right? Where people are attending to grief and to creating belonging and to forming community and drumming circles and retreats and all kinds of things, but completely without engaging in these spaces and these trajectories. So I think it's something to take very seriously. Fatma, I would love you, after Magdalena speaks, only if you're inclined, to please come and comment on the intersectionality piece, but entirely up to you. Please, Magdalena, and thank you again, Marina.
Just listening to Marina. I'm from Croatia. And as soon as she says, I'm from Yugoslavia, Serbia, I understand from within what is she talking about. And I'm so touched with this notion that all this cultural forming is somehow embodied in ourselves. And they just have a need to be silent and to be deep within, searching, how am I othering others? In this region, it is not a matter of color, but it's so much othering. And Marina just opened that space in me. Although me, myself, is mixed. And someone, it was a privilege in the hardest time in this region. And what I will stay silent and thinking about going out of my comfort zone, but still be safe in this region where I live. So that was really touching what you were talking about, and especially was touching the way you were talking about the tune of your voice, which brings so much calmness in this such a hard point in this moment in this world. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Magdalena. Thank you. And thank you for naming this tenderness when we allow it to land.
Yeah.
And what it shows us, and for being able to name our vulnerabilities, because then of course it allows others to name theirs as well, right? And it's this connecting, as you're speaking about so beautifully, this connecting at these deeper levels where things start changing, that compassion piece, the things. Thank you so much, Magdalena.
Hello. This is my first time that I am opening the video or participating, but the topic diversity was very important for me because I live in Israel and I am a Palestinian, and I also part of a Sangha of mostly Jewish people, and mostly Jewish Ashkenazi women and men, like from Europe, and I find it very oppressive in many ways, and particularly in a crisis like this is extreme. I am shocked in so many levels, like, you know, in not only from the Israeli attack, but I can't talk a lot because arrest is around everywhere here with no distinctions. So I wanted to say about intersectionality, what I noticed that I could be, if it's about power and domination, I could be in power and dominated other, what I consider coded in my mind, lower people. So when I start to bring awareness to this, even within my community or from othering the other, you know, and it's bring a lot of release and relief when you start to face the demon inside you and see how you dominate, see, you know, and how you oppress and what to do with that, you know, bring it tenderly to your awareness. And understand the sources coded in the brain, in the body, in the, you know, as you said, socializing and programming and so on and so on. So it is very important topics that very few talk about it. Like, you know, when I was saying it in one of our retreats with my Sangha, and use decolonizing well-being or mindfulness, I was attacked and, you know, pushed away, and, you know, and so I withdraw from the group a little bit. I'm still in the group, and because my heart, I don't have, I don't know. I really, if I say I am not angry on them, although I was angry when this happening, but now I'm really not angry about it. But I felt like we need, as Palestinians in Israel, you know, as citizens, we have to have our safe place to sit together and to discuss these kind of issues within ourselves and face our all ugliness, you know, inside us, and be part of the world to bring change by bringing change in ourselves. You know, so I hope that I was clear. Thank you for listening.
Okay.
Fatma, you move our hearts, and you move mine very much. So thank you for being here. Thank you for naming what you are naming. And thank you for this brave presence of talking about our own demons and being prepared to look within at the ways in which we mirror the power over from without. So I have deep respect and love and appreciation. Thank you so much for your presence. Katarina, please, I see you unmuted.
Yes. I was still touched by this word, the tenderness. And I remember that from the first meeting with you, Cathy-Mae, I already felt that tenderness, that tender wisdom and that wise tenderness. So that also encourages that we can do such a heavy topic here and have the courage to get into it. At the Yamba we had, we invested something in diversity, but it was so cognitive. And now we are approaching it from another side. And you and I already talked about a masterclass. Well, that masterclass is, first of all, you are already in that place, Marina. Confusion, I think, is a wonderful start. Confusion, chaos, curiosity, not only don't know, but then have the courage to go there. And you said, can we free our own minds? I wonder, I really wonder if it's in our tissues. Before I got into mindfulness, I had education in healing and reading chakras and energy. And we would typically not see the client. And so sometimes we are surprised because the energies of someone who is classified as white and someone who is classified as black, on that energy level of our tissues, of our chakras, of our whole energy system, there's no difference. We suffer alike. It's the same. But if I don't have any help to see how it is ingrained in my tissue, can I? So maybe in the masterclass, we address that in a more deeper way. Martine, you're leaving, so I don't want to interrupt. Is she there? I can't see her.
I think Martina has left.
Okay. Her video is not up. So that is what I was asking myself. Can your wise tenderness and your tender wisdom help us to do that, to free our minds? Is there hope? That's the question.
You know, I'm so tempted, Katharina. So thank you. And you know, I want to make a very quick comment. When people say to me, you're wise and you're tender and you're whatever, I nod and I realize people probably think I'm agreeing with you, but I'm trained, I'm raised in organization. And so I don't have a sense of those being my I don't have a sense of it being me or my qualities. I really have a sense of my community and my group and my teachers and those I have that sense. So when you name it, I celebrate my teachers and my ancestors and all the people who hold me. So thank you. It's very much that that Ubuntu notion of it's a they're very shared qualities. And so, you know, with this question of can we have hope? So I will say to you, Archbishop Tutu says, I am a prisoner of hope. You know, and then he laughs his laugh. I'm a prisoner of hope. And then he makes his joyful laugh. And so I really want to put that question back to us, because I think it is up to us, you know, the path and the way we choose to walk the path. Of course, there is lots of kind of academic debate around hope, but we, I think, are talking about the feeling of openness and tenderness and transformation and the possibilities of change. And so I would love to hear from you, from all of you, whether this is something that you envision as possible. Personally, I think change is happening despite us. You know, it's happening despite us. And I'm with Arch. I'm with the Archbishop. So I think there are waves, and I think we are able to form parts of waves of change and to shape and create. If we do this collectively and in community. I think the day of celebrity culture, you know, is spent. I think it is spent, and we still fall into those traps. So, but I said I wasn't going to say, and now I've said. So, but what do you think? What do you think?
Thank you.
Thank you, Katharina.
Well, I asked the question also because I'm always hopeful. I trust. But the way you put it, of course, we must question ourselves. Is that another illusion? And then how are we going to work with that illusion? So it has so many layers to get there. And the same holds for this wisdom tenderness thing, because I've also experienced you as a rebel, as an activist. So how does that match? Well, maybe your velvet voice is the ideal thing to be as a rebel, because if you shout, people shut down their ears. So it's wonderful. Now let's bring all those qualities together to open ears, to open eyes. But when I talk for myself, I'm hopeful. Yes.
And I want to honor also, thank you, Katharina. I want to honor also that we sometimes are in situations that can be very overwhelming, right? Where it's, and I want to name again your courage and your bravery, Fatma. And I see you're unmuted, so I'm going to hand it over to you. Hope and community takes many different forms in different contexts and at different times. Please, Fatma.
I want to show the other face, the coward face of me, and would like to ask Katharina and others in this organization by a simple request, and not to, I was recorded, and if you put this on your website, just do not please cut my voice.
What do you mean, cut your voice? I don't
It's
understand.
like not, don't, like the recording, if I might request not be published in public.
Okay. That needs editing.
Thank you, and I am sorry for that I will cause you extra work.
Yeah, I will see to that. It's a pity because your words were very touching. But of course we respect what you wish.
Thank you.
If anyone wants to share this recording, this means that we will need a bit more time to cut. Yeah, but of course, Fatma, we won't expose you.
Thank you. Anybody who has not yet, please, Kasia, there you are.
Very shortly, I decide to refrain from sharing and commenting and asking questions because I have 1,000 questions, because I'm working with DEI questions, I'm intercultural trainer, and those issues, there are the issues I'm working with every day, whole days. So it was, and almost entirely on the mind level, not the body level. And what I want to say, two things maybe, that I have just read the book of Heather McGee, The Sum of Us, and this is somehow relates to what you said about that there is no zero-sum game. If some unprivileged groups gain, we all gain as community and society, and I think it should be talked about more often in DEI context. Another thing is this openness, tenderness, heartwarming understanding, which is not present there always. There's a lot of blaming and shaming when working with those questions, which is not helpful at all. And the last thing I want to say is that there are some projects that are outside of this white middle class mindfulness sphere, and one of them is mindfulness in Arabic. Probably some of you have heard about it. It's available online, and it was started as an idea that helping refugees, and it's free. So it's for, let's say, everyone, but it's online, available online.
Thank you so much, Kasia, for that concrete example that shows us the ways in which we are able to amplify and expand and do things differently, and at the same time cultivate the practice. Thank you so much for that. And I'm so happy about the work that you are doing. Thank you. Because, you know, one of the things that would be good for Yamba to do is to connect and network these different initiatives and to map them, because that then suddenly gives a very different picture. And it opens up conversation. So that would be a really concrete, positive action.
Well, Cathy-Mae, on that note, I would like to share with all of you that we have a DEI working group, of which Cathy and I are members. And this is one of our first tasks. So Cassia, maybe you would like to join the group, because we want to do a lot more and we need more people because there is a lot out there and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So maybe after this meeting, you contact us via exchange@theyamba.net. There will be more. There is, we are almost out of time, and before more are leaving, I would like to say, Fatma, you were on video all the time, and we will not manage to cut this out. So in order to not lose the value of this, how about keeping the intimacy of this meeting, and only the people here who want to see this again can find the video, and we will only send it to them. We will not publish it. We'll just keep it internally. Would that be okay for you? Then it will not be published, never. Because we won't be able to edit you out. I can't hear you.
You're muted.
Oh yes, of course. I said this in front of these people, but anyway, just maybe because of the situation, I am overreacting.
No. If ever, let's stay in touch. If ever you change your mind, we can. And to inform the other people, Cathy-Mae, we can bring up the part when you talked and nobody else was in the picture.
Okay.
Would that be okay, Fatma?
Yes, thank you.
So only the presentation. I just wanted to address that point before you leave. People have to go and leave, and we share something, but we respect this intimacy and Fatma's wish.
I'm so grateful to you, Katharina. Thank you. That would make me feel a lot more comfortable as well.
Okay.
I honor you, Fatma, and I'm so grateful for your presence here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Richard, do you have something you want to add? It's not that we have to close on the hour. I know that my dear friend Stassi will have to leave because she's going to lead a meditation. So good night.
Thank
but
you.
If you would like to share something, please. Marina, you also have to go. Stay in touch.
Oh, wow, Marina, beautiful meeting you. Oh, Richard, we can't hear you.
You're unmuted, but something is with your microphone.
Your mic, it's not plugged in, or? Shall we turn to the other Richard? No, still can't hear you.
Well, Richard, you can find a way. You're now unmuted again, but we didn't hear you when you were unmuted. So try to find your mic while we listen to Richard UK.
Okay, thank you. I said, well, so many things actually came up. The thing that sort of stands out at the moment, Cathy-Mae, is the disrupting word, the disrupting in the title. And I appreciate there's many different ways of kind of, framing mindfulness and understanding mindfulness. But I actually see it as not entirely, but as a disruptive process in a way, in the sense of like disrupting like ingrained habits of, greed and ill will and ignorance and what in the old language, the old Buddhist language, going against the stream, that these practices, actually are are disruptive in that sense. They cut through this this separateness and this division that human beings are very prone to. And of course, that includes identity as well, that actually, you know, taken to their full extent, then where mindfulness technologies, as it were, can go is into something which is direct experiences of the interbeing, or the you know, not self, and all of that. So I suppose what interests me, what comes up this evening, interests me more generally as well, is how we've got ourselves into a situation where so much in the mindfulness world has been omitted. Why are we so white? You know, why are we so middle class? Why is this so professional? And all of that. I mean, I'm not knocking John Kabat-Zinn. I really like him. I think he's a very nice guy. I've had some personal dealings with him as well. And at the same time, where secular mindfulness came from, this illumination of his, is very individualistic. You know, it's very medicalized. It's very Western. MBCT, you know, the UK where I am, again, you know, it has these characteristics to it. So what you were saying about the curb cutting, I think there's some really important curb cutting that needs to happen. And yes, it needs to happen around whiteness, but it needs to happen in lots of ways. And I suppose what I would throw in is, in order to do that skillfully and compassionately as well, you know, walking our talk, is we have to understand where and how those curbs were built in the first place, because I don't think they're intrinsic to mindfulness. I think they've been built in, you know, like, you know, secular mindfulness was already a colonized project. You know, mindfulness is Asian. If you want to get geographical about it, you know, it's Asian. It was brought over to the West and, you know, changed around a bit, and here we are. So I'm sort of interested in, like, 20, 30 years down the line, why we're not further into the depths, why we're not more socially engaged, you know, why the social value of mindfulness, the social function of mindfulness is not centralized. I find it very frustrating that this has happened. I'm very grateful to you, your presentation and everything that people are talking about here this evening. I would like this to have been much more in the mix 20 years ago, that we wouldn't having to be doing the curb cutting now. So I suppose I'm not really sure what I'm saying here, other than that I think we don't see certain things. I know I don't, in the nature of blind spots, we don't see them. I don't see my whiteness, but I have it reflected back to me. I think there's something about in the world of mindfulness, in the way it is at the moment, we need multiple reflectors back, so we see our blind spots. And I mean, I really appreciate the contribution that you're making to this, and I think we've all got a lot of work to do. Yeah, I don't know if that's useful. Sorry for going on a bit, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Richard. Let me respond to you in one small way by saying thank you. I appreciate and the things you're raising are not simply cognitive issues. They're deep-rooted issues with the problems of othering, of the histories of colony and empire. Mindfulness, of course, is found in many traditions. So yes, you're right. The secularization is of a particular mindfulness that comes from Southeast Asia primarily. But it's, of course, found in many traditions. And I think there's a lot of work underway at the moment to uncover indigeneity and global South traditions that have been silenced. But you're absolutely right that the articulation of the secular mindfulness, articulated with social forces of neoliberalism, whiteness, post-racialism, and that's how we got entangled. It's very entangled now. So we've got this, you know, that entangled problem, which is the mess that we're in now. So I appreciate your willingness to have reflected back to you that which we can't see when systems, of course, invisibilize our privileges and don't ask us to look. So thank you for naming that. I appreciate you. And I'm really hoping that Richard Edwards has got the mic.
I shall try again.
Yes.
There we are. I crawled around the floor a bit and got it working. I'm coming at this from feeling, actually. I feel hugely grateful to Cathy-Mae for the presentation. And I suppose I don't want to share my cognitive response to that because I'm not quite sure that I have a cognitive response to this at the moment. I want to sit with that, and I want to not jump into a cognitive response, because for me that feels as if that will come from the wrong place. And I think at the moment I'm turning towards the feelings that generated within me, and where I felt that in my body particularly. And when you talked about not eating at the table when other people don't have food, I do that, we do that. And we can carve that up so many different ways, but the weight of that's, you know, we do that. We eat at tables. We just redefine our tables and make sure that the people with the food sit at the table with us. And we do that so often, and we do that in so many different ways. And turning towards that, and that movement from empathy to compassion. And when you consider yourself a compassionate individual, but you recognize who you invite to sit at the table with you to eat, and you only ever invite the people that have got food. You know, and we do that. And to sit with that and to look at what needs to change as a result of that realization, of that pain, I think is really important. I'm sorry that's coming from the heart rather than from the mind there, Cathy-Mae, but yeah, that's what I want to say.
I thank you, Richard, and I hope that we are never sorry for things that come from the heart. So thank you for your offering, and I appreciate also your background and how this lands for you with working with homeless people and making this transition into the mindfulness world. And I want to say one more thing in response to other Richard, because it's pertinent to what you're saying. Of course, the Buddhist traditions also understand and appreciate mindfulness differently, right? So the notion of bodhicitta in the Gelugpa tradition is this beauty. It's very, very similar to Ubuntu. It's this beautiful teaching of my freedom is tied up with yours. My freedom is entirely intertwined with yours. And so I can't become free until everyone else is free. And one of my teachers taught that in a way of saying, you know, everybody here, people, these are all angels. who are helping you become free. You just think that you know it, but they actually are letting you out. I love it. I love it. It's like a whole entanglement of the mind. And I think that's such a beautiful way for us to round things off, that this work is all our work, and this work that is that looks as if it's just about structures and inclusion is actually work of liberation. And so we have to continue practicing our liberation and make that more and more real in the world around us. Thank you so very much, Katharina. Thank you.
Thank you. Your words are so beautiful that I would like to have them as the closing words. Thanking you and knowing that there is a future in which we work together. Lovely. All of you, thank you for being here. That's the most important thing, presence. Then we can go. See you soon.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Oh, well.
Bye.
Good night. Can we unmute? Go well.
Bye.
Bye.